You're listening to All the Pieces, a podcast created to keep you informed. Now here's your host, Chief Quality Officer, Dr. Karan Mohan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All the Pieces. I'm your host, Karan Mohan. Rural medicine is a vital part of our health system, and recruiting for it is a very special thing. Without further ado, I want to introduce my favorite person in the organization, but I don't want to steal his thunder. I will let him introduce himself. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mohan. I'm Scott Kelliker. I'm the president of Mosaic Maryville, and I've been with the organization 34 years.
My God.
I know. That just means to tell you I'm old, basically. But half of that's been on the hospital side, and then half of my career has been on the physician development, physician recruitment side. So I held the positions of president of the hospital for a few years, as well as president of the medical group practice.
Wow.
So it's been, just a wonderful journey.
So pretty easy peasy gigs, huh? No hiccups,
No, always went smooth, of course,
No late night emails of panics.
Never.
So, Scott, thank you, first of all, for joining us. I always have a great time talking with you. So our focus today is physician recruitment, right?
Yes.
And you've been doing this for 34 years.
Yes.
What have you seen change over the years when it comes to recruitment?
Yeah, the market's definitely much tougher than it's been historically, primarily because of the physician shortage.
Right.
So in the next 10 years, they're estimating the physician shortage to be 86,000.
Wow.
Which half of that is in the primary care arena. Yeah. So we are all competing, all the hospitals throughout the nation are competing for the same talent. Mm-hmm. So the question is, what makes us different, and why would a physician want to pick us over possibly 5-10 other opportunities? Mm-hmm. The old joke is we don't have mountains and we don't have the sea.
Well, we have a podcast.
So we do have a podcast with you. I mean, right there. But honestly, what are those things that we can offer here in the Midwest, and specifically with Mosaic Health System?
Right.
In order to attract that talent.
Do you think the priorities of the newer generation of physicians is different to, say, 20, 30 years ago?
Yes and no. And I say it in that manner that they still really value high-quality health care. They value the ability to practice and build something that they've always wanted to build. And actually, that's my first conversation with a physician is, tell me your vision for what you're wanting to build. And I don't want you to think of me as your boss. I want you to think of me as your business partner.
Right.
So how do we together build what you've always dreamt of doing, whether that's in St. Joseph or Maryville or Albany?
Right.
And I think that approach, so many of the physicians, now that they're becoming employed by large health systems, think, oh boy, they're going to tell me exactly what I have to do each and every day. Mm-hmm. And if you can change that paradigm, then they really start to get excited about, hey, these folks are different.
Right. And I think that's kind of important too. I think intrinsically as physicians, they prioritize autonomy over their work.
Yes.
More than anything, money being equal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The differentiator.
Right.
Any of the differentiators you think that you've noticed? I know what's my differentiator, like autonomy is one, work-life balance. Yeah. Everybody talks about it, but how does it really play out in real time?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, well, we try to, I always try to tease that information out about, talk to me a little bit about what you're looking for from work, what's important to the family. Right. So, the same themes, good schools,
right,
a safe environment to raise a family. I can't tell you how many physicians I've had from the Chicago area that said, you know what, Chicago was a blast when I was single,
right,
and my wife and I were running around going to dinner. Now that we have kids, right, I don't know that I want to raise a child in the big city environment.
Right.
And so they do look for certain amenities. Is there entertainment, shopping options, restaurants, those kind of things? Or am I in proximity of those things? And that's what's nice about Maryville. We're a stone's throw away from St. Joseph. that houses the majority of those things.
Right.
And in addition, being where we're located, I always tout, we're just minutes away from KCI, International Airport.
Right.
In 3.5 hours, you can be anywhere in the country you want to be.
Right.
And so, I've had several physicians say, I want to be close to the in-laws and parents, but not too close.
Right.
And so, having access to the airport.
I'm chuckling because that's kind of what I'm thinking too.
Having access to the airport actually gives them that ability to be anywhere in a moment's notice, but at the same time, still
close but not too close.
Close but not too close. That's right. That's
I never
right.
thought of that paradigm. I was looking at a hiring practice. Like, we're just 3.5 hours away from your in-laws. Just this minimal amount of inconvenience.
Right.
And that same thought, like, I'm originally from New York, and when I came here, I was still thinking myself, like, okay, this is not New York,
Right,
clearly.
right.
But as I got a family, it's not like I was going to go watch Broadway shows every night.
Yes,
You know what I
right,
mean? It's
right.
like, it's like for the newer physician who have a young family, possibly, it's a whole different thing.
Yes.
So you mentioned Maryville and the proximity to St. Joe, but you're still competing with other systems in
Correct.
the Midwest.
Correct.
Right?
That's true.
So how does your approach differ from, or what do you look for, or what do you do differently to get them in?
Yeah. Well, when we first approach those candidates, obviously I don't talk about just Maryville. I talk about what are the system attributes.
Right.
3 hospital system, 4 counting LTAC, right? And a health system that's very financially healthy, has the latest state-of-the-art technology, the Mayo affiliation, all of those things. So many of the physicians are like, well, at the other places I've interviewed, they've been behind in technology, or
Right.
the health system's struggling. To try to find all those things in one place really helps assure the physicians that, hey, this is a place I want to take a second look at. I also push really hard for an actual site visit. And can I tell you, with all those site visits, I start with the medical center here. I want you to see, the main campus, because it shows so well.
Right.
And I want you to meet your St. Joe counterparts. So like when I was recruiting general surgery, first person I wanted to introduce them to next to Dr. Kinderknecht was Dr. Long, Steve Long. I'm like, I worked with this guy when I was an ER nurse, 1,000 years ago. And, he's a solid player. He cares about the region. He will do whatever he can do in his possibility to make you successful. So now, yes, I'm going to Maryville where I'm in a smaller system, but I feel like I have support. I'm not one small group. I'm part of a much larger group.
Right.
And can I tell you, I think that's resonated really well, so much to the place that we're using that with the other specialists.
Right.
We have a cardiologist that I was fortunate enough to work with here at the main campus. And when he came back, I said, I want you to acclimate with the
rest of the system.
the current group.
Yeah.
And fortunately, the majority of those physicians that he knew and loved are still here.
Yeah.
And that longevity also speaks volumes when the physicians go, Dr. Hindenburg's been here how long?
Yeah.
And
He might be here 34 years too.
yeah, I've already told him we're not going to let him retire. That's not
It's
in the cards.
Yeah. Has it ever backfired on you, the strategy? If somebody said, wow, okay, I love Maryville, but I want to come down to St. Joe. I'm like, oh my God, I want to work at St. Joe.
Oh, actually, knock on wood, not as of yet. And can I tell you, with the surgeons, I actually encouraged them and said, hey, I want you to be as busy as you want to be. You have access to the robot here in St. Joseph.
Vinci, yeah.
So they're actually bringing cases from Maryville to the St. Joseph market to do Da Vinci cases here. They said the surgery personnel have treated them, rolled out a red carpet to them, and they never feel like they're not part or they're imposing on somebody. That the surgeons have embraced them when they come down, and everybody's been so nice.
Right.
Well, again, when they come back and tell everybody that, I can't tell you how much that helps. So they really were supportive. The staff in the OR welcomed you.
Yeah.
That's a busy
It's a
place,
true partnership.
right?
It's a true team.
Yes. And so I'm using that approach with everybody. We've been able to recruit 17 new physicians and nurse practitioners in the last 12 to 15 months.
Wow.
Utilizing that strategy.
Huge.
And I try to do a 30-day, a 90-day, 180-day checkpoint with the physicians. Say, okay, I promised you we would do those things.
Are we delivering?
Are we delivering on those promises? And do we need to make some kind of mid-course, change
That's a good leadership lesson
to satisfy
too.
that?
Yeah.
And the other thing, there comes a point where you move from recruitment to retention, because I can recruit all day long, but if I can't retain those physicians, then it just becomes a revolving door.
Right.
And so those checkpoints help with that retention. And the other thing I always try to check on is how's your significant partner? How's your spouse acclimating to the environment? Who can I put them in contact with that would help them answer childcare needs, or they want to go shopping, where to find this or that,
Right.
That's not on Amazon, of course,
Well,
now
it
with
isn't.
Amazon, right. So,
You could buy a gazebo from that place.
but can I tell you that, you really have to think about not only the physician, but their
They're
partner.
the anchor.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like my segue, which is, we know the world-class facilities, Da Vinci robots, state-of-the-art, equipment and subspecialists, Epic, which is a
Right.
huge retainer because a lot of residents
Oh,
do their training
absolutely.
on Epic. What are the challenges to that recruitment? Because we can be the best hospital in Missouri.
Yeah.
But some might say, well, it's still Northwest Missouri.
Right. Well, and I think when I look at that, if I had to say just community-wise, it would be amenities. Trying to match up, do we have the amenities that again, it's really not so much always the physician's looking for, but the spouse or the significant partner. And again, I try to put those connections. If we don't have them in the local community, how can I make those connections with somebody here in the St. Joseph market?
Do you have a story that you can share where this style of navigating challenges
Gosh,
without breaking
divulging.
some confidences? Yeah.
Well, actually, one of the new surgeons' fiance is in their residency program in Kansas City.
Okay.
And, he asked the question, he said, hey, Scott, would I be able to live in St. Joseph if I did all my call directly from Maryville? I'm like, absolutely, you can.
Yeah.
He actually stays in the hospital on all of his call days, so he's available. And at the same time, I want to make sure he maintains that relationship, with his fiance, because she might be happening to come out with a vascular surgery.
You're playing the long game, Scott.
Yes. Well, you always have to look in the future, but
I like it.
Just good people, and
Sure.
anything that I can do to help support them, I feel like that's my role.
And that's essentially the role of a business partner, right? Is how do you help the individual, the caregiver, the talent, if you will, not that
Yes.
you're not, but do their job to the
Right.
best of their ability with the least amount of hiccups.
Right. And I've always felt like if I'm helping the physician in any way,
Yeah.
that's helping the patient.
100%. 100%.
So any problems I can solve, any hassle factors that I can alleviate for them, that's going to make them, more efficient, more productive, happier with the practice.
Which trickles down.
Which directly correlates with patient care, right?
Yeah. Happier caregivers equals happier patients
Absolutely.
equals a better
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And that's the inner nurse in you, probably. That's still connected to the patient care part of things,
Well, and speaking of that, I feel like I grew up with physicians 30 years ago, working for 12, 14 hours a day in the emergency department. But physicians were my best friends. The physicians, spending that time with them, we did stuff after work.
Yeah.
They were in my wedding. I mean, so I have this true admiration for physicians and the sacrifices they've made, their families have made, to come here. And I feel like if I've talked you into moving all the way across the country, I've got to follow through on those things.
Yeah, and it's a sacred promise.
Absolutely.
And
and I take it to heart.
Yeah, I feel
if you can't tell.
No, I do, and I'm happy you're showing that emotion, because that is something in our profession we kind of build this iron wall around, and it's unhealthy, I believe. We have to be a little vulnerable to this whole game of healthcare. We call these caregivers and healthcare and this macro changes and all the 340B stuff, but at the end of the day, we are human beings taking care of human beings, and it's any way which way we can do it. It's the great thing. Going back to the long game, how do you think this UMKC School of Medicine partnership will play out? I know you're sort of recruiting, and
yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, two things come to mind right away. The majority of physicians want to be affiliated with a teaching, higher level of education. So when they hear we have an affiliation with UMKC and now the residency program, they're instantly excited about that.
Yeah.
And the majority of them will go, how can I become more involved with that? So just from and that's for everybody on the medical staffs. Like this is a really good thing. And it also speaks highly of the health system to be able to have that interaction with UMKC. The second part is obviously our hope is as we develop the residency program, it'll become a feeder system.
Yeah.
Because I think we all know that residents tend to want to come to work for those organizations that they've spent some of that time
and they have relationships with. And
Absolutely. And so, you mentioned the long game.
Yeah.
That's part of the long game strategy is to make sure that we have a constant feeder system. And even if that residency program's in Maryville, let's say that for some reason all of the opportunities, vacancies would be filled, gosh, we'll be working with St. Joseph and Albany to say, hey, what can we do, right? If we have these folks that truly love the system, want to be retained by the system, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, basically. And if it's good for the system, it's good for the
good for everybody.
Yeah, it's like the beehive mentality.
Win-win-win. Yeah.
What do you think is a surprise to physicians, in your opinion, that you're trying to recruit to Mosaic? Have you heard a theme when they come like?
Yes.
Yeah. What's that?
So a lot of our physicians, when I was in a previous role, I was able to actually recruit out of the Kansas City market. They all said the same thing. They would walk in the lobby of the main campus, and they'd look at me and go, "We had no idea this was here."
I had that same emotion.
And I always told them, I go, good, that means our strategy is working because we wanted everybody just from Kansas City to think, there's this little small hospital out in the middle of a cornfield somewhere, not knowing that typically when you compared any of our numbers, we would be third to fifth in any statistic you wanted to use in the Kansas City market. Right. So they had no idea how nice the facility was, how advanced the technology was here, and then the patient volume.
Yeah.
They're like, you serve how many patients?
Yeah.
And so when I could look at a physician and say, you can be as busy as you want to be.
I mean it.
And I mean that. Yeah. And you tell me when you need the next partner. Yeah. I'm never going to recruit anybody unless I have that conversation with you, and you're going to tell me when it's time. When you're ready to call uncle, let me know, and I'll turn on the recruiting strategy.
That's awesome.
But there's a great recruitment team. I mean, again, the only reason I've been successful, in the Maryville market is because of the support I get from, Mike Poore and Drew Keysbury and Dr. Turner, can I tell you, there's nothing I've asked for that community or from a recruitment standpoint that would improve the care that they've said no to in the last year and a half, And if anything, I've got the question, you've done this for a while, why aren't you just do it? Go do it, Yeah. But I always feel like I need to ask permission, a little bit. But they have been nothing but supportive. And the same way with all the over 34 years, I built a lot of wonderful relationships here.
Yeah.
And so
it compounds like a lot of different things in life.
So, I have Marcia Pryor on speed dial. Marcia.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
No, she keeps me out of a lot of trouble. I'll just tell you that. Scott?
She keeps me out of trouble too. And Dana Anderson as well.
Oh, Dana Anderson has been a blessing. Can I tell you, first of all, what a superb, nurse or clinical background's amazing. And then, as past president of the LTAC, she comes with this wealth of knowledge. And, I always tell folks there's two types of people. There's people that talk about getting things done, and then there's people that get things done. Dana's one of those people that get things done. So if she finds a problem, she is on it and talking to the caregivers, talking to the managers, what do we need to solve this? And when she says solve it, it's like today. Yeah. How are we going to solve this today? Yeah. And that's just going to allow us to go even faster, build quicker, put the things in place that everybody wants, and improve patient care, improve the physician satisfaction, and it truly, she is such an asset. Yeah. I walk in there every day and thank heaven, Dana Anderson's here.
Look at that.
Seriously,
Dana, if you're listening,
I do.
Scott's a huge fan.
Huge fan, number one fan.
So I just want to backtrack one more time before we come to a close. And, you mentioned retention versus recruitment.
Yes.
What's the difference in your approach to retaining versus recruiting?
I think in retention, again, you have to have a longer term strategy in terms of why you have to get everybody on the same page. Why do we want to retain? A lot of excitement about recruitment.
Yeah, it's
but once
fancy.
They're here, what do we do to keep them here and make sure that the practice is growing, that everyone in the family is acclimating? And Dana and I just met with our physicians Monday and said, hey, it's really time for us to start planning retention events. And wouldn't it be fun if we could do retention events with the entire system and pick different places that a new physician may have never been to, And I know from past experience, family events draw the biggest crowds, So ideally, if Scott can wave a magic wand, we would look at 3 family events and then maybe 1 couples event to have something every quarter that everybody could look forward to. And the value is really, when the groups, 325 and 350 with Maryville, 360, 370 with Albany, I can't tell you how many folks will go, gosh, I know of you, but this is the first time I've met you in person. Yeah. And that's so much fun to see when you do get the physicians together, just that socialization that they get to do. And it's magic when it happens.
Yeah, that's true for physicians. They get to meet physicians through the notes before they actually get to meet them face to face, and finally you get to meet them in an event. I think family events, any kind of social events are a huge part of that fabric that keeps us all together.
And how would how long does it take to learn what all's out there in the community that I didn't even know existed, and they start to find, other physician couples that they want to do things with, and then that support system starts to build, especially for the newer.
The relationship goes outside of the hospital to the community.
Yes. And I know I've used the term physician, but again, I think of nurse practitioners and physicians. Nurses, I mean, recruitment and retention, all those principles apply across the board to them, regardless of
Roles.
license or role. Yeah.
All right, Scott, thanks for that. Final question, little fun one. Finish the sentence. All right. If I had a dime for every time a physician I was trying to recruit said blank, I'd be a millionaire.
Tell me about the call schedule. How often am I going to be on call?
Yeah, I get that. Don't mess with my call. Don't mess with my money. Don't mess with my free time. Right? That I can see that. I think I've asked that too many times. Well, thank you, Scott. And there you have it, folks. This was a very special episode for me because I know Scott and I've learned tremendously from him, not just as a human being, but as what leadership in action looks like. And it shows in the work of the recruitment and retention, not just in Maryville, but across the board. And I'm thankful for your service. Not that you're retiring. I was just saying I've learned a lot from you.
No, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about you. I hope
gosh.
you know. So.
Get to know me a little bit more. You might change your tune. If you guys want to know how to get recruited or how you want to be retained, reach out to Scott.
Yes.
He is chock full of ideas, I'm sure. And there you have it, folks, for this very special episode of recruitment and retention in Northwest Missouri, not just rural medicine, but in general, and some really chock full of great information in this one. Until next time, take care, brush your hair.